Good morning from Tubac, Arizona. Today's adventure starts at the location I spent the night last night, at the Tubac Country Inn. And I wanted to make a note about this place really quick before we head to the main feature today. Unless I'm camping or something like that, I oftentimes don't spend any time anymore filming the hotels and things I stay in, because it's not that often that I do. But when I find one that I really like, I do want to share it, because this whole community is beautiful. Really been enjoying my very short time here in Tubac. Got a lot of character, very artsy. All right, you'll have to apologize because my bed is unmade. It's the next morning, I'm leaving, but it's clean, it's not bad. But here's your charming Tubac Country Inn. I really enjoyed this place a lot. I would say in the last year or so, one of my favorite new places. I would say, like I said, reasonably priced. You might be able to find deals off season here. For me this time, it was under $200 for this particular stay, and really love it. Alrighty, here's my big old key for suite numero uno, and I'm gonna put it here in the key thing. Bye bye, Tubac Country Inn, you're awesome. Now, coffee. Today is Monday, April the 8th, the day of the eclipse. I'll be out and about, most likely in Tumacacori, exploring old Spanish ruins here in southern Arizona from a period the Spanish pushed into Mexico, late 1600s into the 1700s. So older European history here than we usually seek out on this channel. Really excited about it. I had a grandiose plan, and I was going to take you to several spots, Tumacacori being one of them, plus some outliers that are not as well preserved, but I learned you really can't go visit these other sites unless you're on a guided tour with a National Park Service rangers. So that kind of thwarted my plan for how I wanted to go about this episode, but it's okay, because Tumacacori is the big draw, I would say, for this episode, the thing that I've wanted to see the most, and it's open. In a few minutes, it should be open. Before I get coffee here, maybe I'll find coffee if I wander around enough, or else I think there is a Starbucks somewhere here. There's actually a directory sign. There's these interesting buildings I didn't really get to check out last night that I wanted to see. Now, Tubac is south of Tucson. It was established in 1752, because this is the area of Pimeria Alta, I think is what it's called, the land of the Pimas, and that was the name the Spanish gave to this area of the Sonoran Desert. So there's a lot of settlement happening here earlier than your typical European pioneers that came from the east. Today's time frame is going to have to do with somewhere around here, 1691 to the early 1700s. The time of Father Kino, a Jesuit missionary responsible for a lot of the missions that are well known here in Arizona. And here's your Tubac School of Fine Art. That's what that castle building is. See, I told you, lots of art here. This is what I wanted to do right here, the Tubac Presidio State Historic Park Museum, where they have some excavated remains of the Presidio. Nothing major, but you learn a lot about that time of history, and it's something I've recently started reading up on and have become kind of fascinated with now. A lot of this adventure in southern Arizona is going to be more devoted, I think, in the next day or so to pondering the old Spanish history, not necessarily the cowboys and the old west that we usually do. Kind of sucks that it's not open, but the national park, Tumacacori, is open 7 days a week, as you're going to see. And I would say if you were going to pick either of the two from what I've seen, it's hard to say without having been there, but I'd say Tumacacori is the one that for me. I don't know what the cost of living is here exactly. There's a lot more down this way than I thought. Tucson is not far either. We're south of Tucson, heading towards the Mexican border, not far from Mexico. Oh, look at this building. It's for sale, Amy, it's for sale. An old adobe brick building? Come on. There's the number. Anybody in the market for something with adobe brick? It's probably an old building. The Pennington House, the historic Pennington House. It's for sale. I know nothing about the Penningtons, but I'm learning to spot old, and this is old. You can see the plaster's kind of worn away and exposing the brick. Wow. And right out beyond are some mountains that we should be driving. I don't know if those are the mountains we're gonna be driving on the west side of, or if it's on the other side, but we're gonna be doing some off-roading later. But anyway, let's head to coffee, then some history. I plotted a new route to a local coffee establishment. We'll see if it's open. I can't operate without caffeine. All right, 2 Backcountry Inn, you're awesome. We'll be back. Lots of friendly people here. Start. Come on.
Head north on Barul Street, then turn right.
Barul Street. I'm confused
Turn
already.
right toward Barul Street, then turn left onto Barul Street.
So you guys see there's no right turn here, right? I'm not...
Head on Camino Otero, then turn right onto Barul Street.
This is one of those situations where you just ignore her until you get somewhere.
Turn left onto Calle Baca, then turn right onto Plaza Road.
Okay. Show me the coffee, please. I see cars, so that's a good sign. I see a sign that says coffee. So hopefully the coffee tastes good. I'm not a, right now it's just
Your
about the
destination
caffeine.
is on the right.
All right, we're gonna go in and see what I'm saying? It's all like art galleries. Look at that giant knight. That is awesome. I want that for our yard. All right, so I stopped at the Tubac. See, I'm inclined to say Tubac, but when I was Googling it, I kept hearing Tubac. So Tubac Deli and Coffee Company and Bakery. They have ice cream there. I'm just reading the sign in front of me. I took the GoPro off the roof while I enjoy my breakfast here. I got their house coffee, the self-serve coffee. They had a house blend and a French roast. And I got a cheese Danish. Very pretty looking, nice golden color. I wanted to get something that I'm familiar with from other places to have a basis of comparison. So, not trying to turn into a food review channel here, but when I taste local cuisine, I gotta comment. All right, so the coffee first. That's the most important business this morning. So, smells very good. So I like the smell of it. It's hot. Had to put a sleeve on it. The Tubac Deli and Coffee Company. It's good. I would give it a better than Starbucks, which I like Starbucks, don't get me wrong. That's what I usually get there is the cheese Danish and coffee. So let's try. This. Wow. That shut me up. It's so good. Oh my God. Yeah. Starbucks got nothing on this. Not even close. All right, Tubac Deli. Time to go to Tumacackery. All right, folks, here we go. Tumacackery National Historic Park. A Cactus Atlas first. Through the giant wooden doors we go. These are huge doors. I paid my admission. I have a national parks pass, so paid my admission in the past, but in the little museum in there is fantastic displays in here of what I'm going to assume are relics from that time frame. Here's a rendition of this in probably an older time. the uprising of 1751. These are fragments of the mission bell right here. First look on the grounds here. It's beautiful. There's the old mission. They do give you your standard national park brochure when you come in, but they also have this nice map that tells you the various stuff on the property here, because it wasn't just this church, this mission, which arguably is the La Pièce de Résistance here at Tumacacori today, which we can go inside apparently. There's lots more to this that we'll try to unpack a little bit as we explore the grounds on this beautiful spring day. I'm going to give you the quick summary of what this is and what the Spanish were essentially doing up in these parts. So in the late 1600s, missionaries started to push up here into what's now Arizona. It was Mexico at the time. And they started to build basically cultural centers, centered around religion, of course, but also ranches, a little bit of mining in the area, as well as, I guess, military in the form of presidios, which up the road at Tubac, you got to see an example. Well, you got to see the grounds where a presidio once sat to know the proximity to this. But so basically a system to try to bring culture, technology, and religion to the native people of this area. And I've read accounts, both good and bad, of how all that went down, but history would tell us that the Spanish were not very successful pushing up here, and eventually retreated. The U.S., through the Gadsden Purchase, ended up obtaining this as part of the United States. And basically, I think in some, the Spanish were pretty much pushed out, I think, by raiding Indians, the Apache, and just years of decades and centuries of struggle in this area. It would have been a really hard place to live. It only seems appropriate to save the church, the mission, for last, because it's the biggest structure, but there's other stuff on the property that we're gonna go take a look at. Figure let's go start off with that and see what that's all about. You could see an adobe brick inside that structure. Almost looks like it's had a helping hand over the years, but I could be totally wrong about that. So this is indicative of what a home would look like for the O'odham people, the ones that lived in this area when the Spanish arrived. And it's interesting because you almost can see some influence in the way the Hohokam built things in this structure, but it's also very different, and maybe a good first clue of why we say things like the Hohokam culture disappeared. Not the people, not the DNA, but the culture, because this is definitely, there's some similarity to it, but there's also some difference. Anyway, let's go check this out, because, you know, interestingly, if you really break it down and you look at some of these European structures we look at, like at Ruby, Arizona, all they are mud walls with some kind of wooden roof. And that's about it, sometimes with plaster on the outside. But fundamentally, how is this really on some level that much different? And I was reading the brochure, I think those almost look like Ocotillo arms, but I forget the term, what those are. But that is apparently how the technique worked. You want to bump your head on that, man. It's very earthen smelling in here, like dirt. Just musty, not unpleasant, that earthen aroma, but I feel like I'm in like a mud hut. I really do. And one whose ceiling is very uneven, and for a tall person like me, I don't want to bump my head on that. So that's a good place to start, is really understanding it was these people minding their own business. They were masters of arid farming. And then these people show up on horseback, probably metal armor, something they've never seen before, and then start building all this stuff and basically trying to tell these people how to survive out here when these people were already masters. That being said, you can grow a lot of very interesting things out here, and this is an example. This is an old orchard. I don't think the trees are original trees that are hundreds of years old. I could be wrong, but basically here's an example of mission life, and what I was trying to tell you is that much more than just religion. And we're coming up closer on the Santa Cruz River, which runs north and south from Tubac down here, and in places further south. So the Spanish were basically following rivers, which they would have needed to, because they had horses and oxen and all of these kind of creatures that would need water. So following these rivers, it was a lifeline, and it helped them do things like plant these orchards. For today's journey, I'm gonna stop here, but there's the trail that goes up to the Presidio along the Santa Cruz, and the significance of that is it's basically Anza's trail. You've heard about Anza and his missions up to California. This is where they were heading up into the United States. He eventually went all the way to San Francisco to help found San Francisco. The Spanish, I would say, are the OG European pioneer explorers out in this region, and dealing with the true unknown, not knowing what was out there, of course, in their endless search for the 7 cities of gold. It is a beautiful spring day though, and I'm just enjoying the flowers and all the grass and the green and the sound of the Interstate 19 out there. Not really, that part I could do without, but look at that. All right, so I'm consulting my little book here and trying to unpack what everything is. That over there is something called the Convento, and I'm not sure what its function was. This is the remains of the Jesuit church that was here. My best guess is that what we're looking at in the background might be a Franciscan church, and the Jesuits were expelled at some point in Spanish history. I don't remember the exact year, but I wonder, was there a smaller church here at first? This was originally known as what was called a, gosh, I'm trying to remember the Spanish word for it, but a church that was visited. So there wasn't like a full-time priest here, and a priest would come occasionally, but then I believe it converted to a main center later. But these are all histories we'll have to unpack at a different time. Oh, cool. You can actually see what I presume is old wood, original wood. What is this here, like a temple or something? A convento. Let's see where the other wooden beams would have gone on the wall, and you can actually see some of the original wood in there, made by the hands of the Spanish. Okay, so I got the gist of this here. This is basically storage for farming tools, seeds, and things that they would need to do to stock up to survive winters when crops weren't growing. Something I would like to add the Hohokam, the ancestral Puebloans, and others had known how to do for hundreds of years before. It didn't really need this, I think, to survive, but more of a European style. So let's see who's buried here. I don't see any information here that says it. I think there were Spanish that were buried here that were with the church that were relocated later. So these might be a mix of Spanish and O'odham, I don't know. Converts. This is Juanita. Actually, this is a more recent, engraved 1950 to 1916. So this would have been a little infant. And then there's all these graves with wooden headstones, and I don't know who's buried here, but I bet you the Spanish records do. Because they were, as we learned in the museum, the friars or the priests were very meticulous in documenting marriages, deaths, things like that. Rest well, all of you. You probably toiled and worked hard in your lives, and you deserved this nice long rest in this beautiful spot. If only we will be so fortunate one day. Okay, maybe the folks won't have such a peaceful rest here after all, because apparently these graves were all vandalized, dug up for artifacts at some point, well before this became a national monument. So I don't know. I was thinking people were having a nice long rest here, but their graves were all disturbed. But yeah, this was the grounds where the missionaries created this to bury converts, basically. So I bet you most of the people buried here are not Spanish, but oh, I bet. Like being out here in the very early 1900s, or heck, let's just say the early 1800s. Maybe you don't have a lot of time for leisure, I know, but just imagine being someone that was able to settle out here, that finally was able to have a little bit of leisure time and start exploring before these things were discovered and made into national monuments and stuff. Just the excitement. You know, I don't think our generation has much left like that in the world today that is unknown, like a true adventure like that. At least here in the United States, I would say not. All right, well, that just really leaves one more thing here, and that's the tour of the old mission. Cemetery was fantastic, though. I really enjoyed that. It's just sad to hear, but not surprising how everything was ruined. There is a door that goes in this way, but I'm gonna go in through the front and make a grand entrance here. This is the old mission, Tumacacori. I wonder how long it took to build this thing, you know? Just think of the tools of the time. You know, they didn't have modern equipment to build things like this. It's an old, I don't think it's the original bell. We saw fragments of it, but look at that. Here we are, the moment I've been waiting for, the mission. All right, into the mission we go. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I almost don't have the words right now. I'm sure back in the day this was even more ornate. I think you can still see some paint on the walls, but I imagine this was all painted and there were idols and just lots of beautiful things to see here. And here's a good kind of cross section. You can see that technique, the same thing we saw at Ruby, how this is really no different than what people were doing in the 1920s out in Arizona, these construction techniques. Unless this was a later time and they put the plaster on, and at one point it was all adobe brick. That could be, but I bet you not. Keep in mind, this would have been, what are we talking about, late 1600s or early 1700s. So as we know, European culture had come a long way at that point. So here's a depiction of what this would have looked like back in the day. The walls would have been white. The ceiling looks similar to what it is, and there just would have been more painting and color in here. I mean, the walls are still, where the plaster is kind of a white hue. I assume they would have been painted over, though, even more white. And there had been a lot more ornate stuff on the walls, basically. Techniques probably learned from the Romans. There's little portals looking out onto the grounds, and this is the artismal room, baptismal room, basically. So they would have performed baptisms in here, and there's like a hidden door, so that might be a special room, but this is where baptisms would have been performed, right here, the baptistry. So if you're an Arizonan, how many of you knew about this history of your state? I knew about it, but I just never took time to explore it or really give it its due, and something we're changing today. And today's the day of the eclipse. It should be starting approximately now. Thinking about an hour, it should be at its fullest. It does look a little slightly darker out there, but I'm in a old Spanish mission during an eclipse. How cool is that? All right, so I think this is maybe the most appropriate place to end a video, standing where Spanish missionaries stood hundreds of years ago, preaching to natives, surviving, making an existence out in a brand new world that nobody knew a thing about. Amazing. If you like this video, subscribe and tell your friends, all of that kind of stuff. And seems sacrilegious to say that in here, but we'll see you next time. Bye.